Welcome back, Irish fans. Breaking on Braves Boys podcast. Finally got some new news. Notre Dame has hired Hamlet Tibbs as their new assistant coach, and Mike Brey wanted a young guy as his new assistant, shot out of a cannon, and he went outside the Notre Dame family and got it with Hamlet Tibbs. So, going to get into Tibbs' journey, kind of what he'll bring to the staff, and some of the connections he has, and just kind of break down the hire by Notre Dame. To start off, I don't hate the hire. It's kind of another wait and see hire for me, kind of like Antoni Wyche was, and that's still a little bit in progress. We still have to see how Wyche recruits a little bit. A lot of the recruitments that Notre Dame won since he's been on staff have been a result of Ryan Humphrey or Anthony Solomon. But Hamlet Tibbs is a guy who was a past first point guard as a player, didn't have a super long playing career, played a little bit in college, but then ended up being a student manager, I believe, at West Virginia. Then went to Albany Academy for his first full-time job. Went to the City Rocks in the summer, which is actually coincidentally J.J. Starling's AAU program, and that's really important. Maybe his most important job that he's had in terms of a stepping stone job, along with a job that can still provide him connections today. Notre Dame hasn't recruited the UIBL circuit super well over the last few years, but now I think with even more connections there, they do have an opportunity to do well. And kind of looking at Starling's recruitment with all those big time suitors and just all the talented players on that circuit, it's really important for Notre Dame to get in there and get guys from there. And I think Brian Solomon and Pat Rogers understand that, and that's why they were at Peach Jam essentially the entire last 2 weeks. And if they can have more guys with connections on that circuit, it's really important. And Tibbs after that went to Vermont, made a few NCAA tournaments, and ended up at Albany in 2021 before stepping up to Notre Dame this upcoming season. And what I really like about Tibbs is he fits the mold of what Brey wanted as an assistant, with a young, kind of a shot out of a cannon attitude. But you also look at his history, and guy's been in the business for a long time. The guy's coached at two Division I's, has been on the biggest UIBL or the biggest AAU circuit, and already. So 7 years at Vermont, a few years with the City Rocks, a few years at Albany Academy, and a year at Albany. That is a lot of good jobs, and now this is a great job for him. So it's certainly a step up, but what I do like is obviously the experience that he has, even with being a young guy. So that's maybe the most appealing part to me is, one, the connections on the UIBL circuit that he has. Guys like Jim Hart, coach the City Rocks, one of the most famous AAU coaches in the country, and then he worked under him. So obviously also has other connections all around the circuit, and that can help Notre Dame. It's certainly helped Mike Brey over the years, just having connections like that with high school coaches, with AAU coaches, and if Notre Dame can get more of those connections, especially on the biggest circuit, that's huge and obviously important. And they had the connections with Starling, with not with him, but they had the connections with Starling, and it helped them to land a guy like that. So in terms of recruiting, I really like the connections. And I also think I talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, but having a guy who is young and can be creative is really important for Notre Dame, especially with the departure of Humphrey, who was maybe their most creative recruiter. I think it's really important for Notre Dame to find alternative ways to sell themselves to recruits other than just the typical official, wow, this is a great campus, whatever. You have to find ways to get guys to come to Notre Dame. You have to get guys who otherwise wouldn't really look at Notre Dame or be interested to figure out that they should be interested. And if Notre Dame can have that with Tibbs, Wyche, and Solomon, if they can get some creativity out of the staff like Brey has praised Humphrey for and praised the staff for in past years, it's going to be really important, especially in the NIL transfer portal age. So that is something that I think Notre Dame could probably do well with Tibbs, and I think that's also something that's really important. Going into kind of the on-floor coaching, like I said, he was a guard when he played, so I'm guessing that will mean Solomon will handle the bigs. I think Tibbs is more of a guard-type guy. A lot of the players that I've seen that have developed at Vermont have been guards over his tenure, so I think Solomon will handle the bigs, like Brace kind of alluded to, but I don't think that's really set in stone. I think maybe there could be a rover type thing on staff with Tibbs or any of the three coaches really, but I don't think he's a straight up Humphrey replacement in that aspect. I think Solomon will probably work more with the bigs, and that's going to be really important over the next few years. I think Bray probably trusts Solomon, who's been his right hand man for a while outside of Balanis, to kind of handle that, rather than a first year Power Five coach. And I think guys like Dom Campbell, Van Allen Lubin, Matt Zona have to develop for Notre Dame to get where they want to over the next few years. So that's probably the most important position to develop for Notre Dame. And I'm not sure that Bray's going to trust a former guard who's in his first year of Power Five coaching in that role. But I do think he can certainly help Notre Dame with player development and can really help on the recruiting trail. So this is a step for Tibbs, and I'm not 100% sure this is going to work out or anything. And this is kind of a wait and see hire for me as well. Like White, Solomon, you knew they nailed it. White and this, I think, are kind of wait and see hires. But Bray seemed to know exactly what he wanted and went outside the family to get it with Tibbs. And I think it's a solid hire on the surface. We kind of have to see how the player development goes and if the recruiting kind of connections and the recruiting attitude that he seems to have can help Notre Dame. I do love that it's a young guy who players can relate to, who has coached on that level and kind of know what AAU is like from firsthand account. And it's a guy who played recently, who's young, but is also old enough that has experience and is mature. So I think it's a solid hire on the surface. It's just kind of a wait and see thing for me. So I appreciate you guys watching. Tibbs certainly has some big shoes to fill. After the loss of Ryan Humphrey, that was maybe Notre Dame's best staff, Mike Bray's best staff of his tenure in the past year, which really helped that team turn around. But they're going to have to start over now without Humphrey, without Blake Wesley. And Tibbs is certainly a guy that has some excitement around his hire. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back with some more videos soon, I'm sure. Peace.